for good reasons and bad. And when this Riyasi attack happened, on the same day there was a cricket match going on somewhere, and while I'm myself a big fan of cricket, uh, having followed it all my life, not so much now anymore, but you saw on the internet, all kinds of videos where people were dancing around, and really celebrating that victory, which I have no problems with. But given the kind of uh, massacre that had happened, um, I thought the news would travel really fast. I'm not blaming the people who were celebrating because obviously they might have been unaware. But we see a recurring pattern where something like that happens in India, and the influencers, the policymakers, the celebrities, they seem to be completely cut off from reality, right? As the author of Hindus in Hindu Rashtra, right? You have a lot of things to say about the state of affairs today. Some not very pleasant, some hopeful. So, whatever has transpired in the very recent past, and you've reflected long on these issues. I think your book mostly deals with how law and policy and how the framework of the Indian Republic, how it deals with the Hindu citizens and with the Hindu religion. So how do these two books talk to each other, right? If you could just help us with that, and also, your thoughts on the recent chain of events.
Shalom, everyone. First of all, congratulations to my very dear friend Vamsee. It's a real privilege and an honor. I think it's a very serious question that Ashish asked. And first of all, thank you, Ashish, for taking the names of the deceased. And I'll just add to that, the tragedy was that as many in the media now, the reports are coming out, are saying that T2 Sahani, one of the names that you took, is a 2-year-old boy. He survived the initial terror attack. So the terrorist bullets did not get him, got the driver. The bus fell down into a gorge. So T2 Sahani was alive. He was unhurt in that sense. But then the terrorists climbed down the gorge. And for the next 1 hour, they fired at the bus wreck. And that is what killed T2 Sahani. So for anyone to say that terrorism has no religion, I think it's just vile. Let's just accept that. We've reached a stage where I think even though in our hearts and minds we want to say something that is the truth, we are being prevented from saying so. It's just an army of zombies that has suddenly descended. And it is very befuddling, especially because to a Darwinian atheist or to someone who also does science, is that any view is kept on the table. You want to accept it, you don't want to accept it, it's up to you. No idea is sacrosanct. And every idea is to be celebrated till the time it is junked, accepted till the time it is junked. And everything happens without even hurting a fly. This is what all of us have been brought up on. And now it's virtually impossible, even in the fields of science, to do so. We saw during COVID how medical practitioners, scientists were virtually prevented, cancelled, deplatformed for putting forth their views. It's unbelievable. And this all has happened around us in an age where all of us thought we have the power to tell the truth, that everything has been democratized, that every one of us has a phone, has a Twitter account, is on social media. We can say what we want, so the truth will be out. And exactly the opposite is happening right before our eyes. I can't believe it. It's so bizarre, so bizarre. And one harks back with, I think, even poignancy is not the word, with pathos, that uh, the word Big Bang, the theory that we accept that created the universe, Big Bang theory, that everything started, and then, of course, Hubble shift came, and now we know that it is true. Of course, we don't know what was there before the Big Bang. Um, but the person who coined this phrase Big Bang was the one who actually believed in the other opposite theory of steady state theory, Hoyle. Such was the beauty of science. Everything was on the table. Every person's idea was celebrated, and we've somehow, I don't know what has happened. And now, when Vamsee, what we are seeing unfolding in the US universities in the last, I think, especially 6 months, 7 months, is beyond scary. It's beyond scary. So I would like to say 3 or 4 points, Ashish, if I may. I think more than rearming Hinduism, because I read the first edition and I've skimmed through this. I agree with all your premise, but I would like to say, more than rearming Hinduism, we need to disarm Abrahamic religions if Hinduism is to survive. What do I mean by disarming? I mean legally disarming. Because let's be very honest about it. There is no other way. I am not advocating any other way. But you are seeing that there are religions that hold sacrosanct as one of their principal dogmas as to convert others, to bring others into their fold. That is an axiom in them. In fact, you are rewarded heaven if you convert someone and bring that person into their fold. And if you have such philosophies within a society, how can logically Hinduism survive? It's almost impossible, because the rewards on the other side are just too many. And we've seen how coercions, forced conversions have led to vast swathes of Indian lands, territory, peoples being converted. And the next stage, obviously, is, as we know, multiple examples, that the person who's converted is more vociferous in proclaiming his newly adopted religion than even the people who have been through generations belonging to that religion or that dogma. So there is no way out. As the most prominent example, Allama Iqbal, the poet who was supposedly called the ideological father of Pakistan, his grandfather was a Kashmiri Pandit. And who would have thought that it would take 1.5 generations for someone to be so vocal, and absolute religious bigot, in the sense that he said, I have a sole purpose on this earth, which is to defeat infidelity and break all idols, and that is the whole sole purpose of Islam. I mean, these are his words. He was the one, in fact, who was the pallbearer of Ilmuddin, the one who killed the publisher of Rangila Rasool. And these are the people we celebrate. There are awards on Allama Iqbal in India. In Pakistan, of course, there would be, but in India, there are awards on Allama Iqbal. In fact, the word Allama itself should not be used, because that is in reverence to this guy. So what other things does one require? I think the most prominent one is legal. You have to be absolutely certain that Hinduism cannot survive if you carry on with this process of turning a blind eye to illegal conversions. We've seen it in the South. We've seen it in Punjab, of all places. No one seems to be acting on this. But more important than that, how are we rearming Abrahamic religions? And I don't want to go back to the book that I've written, but I think it's fairly clear that if you keep on discriminating against Hindu places of worship, Hindus, their ways of rites and beliefs, and keep on looking the other way, not just that, keep on appeasing the people who belong to other faiths, you are in fact disarming Hindus and rearming legally the other faiths, that even Rabindranath Tagore said 150 odd years ago, 130 odd years ago, that if there are two religions in this world that are intent upon destroying every other religion, and they are Christianity and Islam. And he also said the only way to, I might be paraphrasing, but he said the only way to make peace with them is to embrace them. So he was also, sorry to sound despondent because Sai is obviously here. But the fact is, there is no way out. I'm being very honest about it. Sooner or later, I doubt with the policies we have, I doubt Hinduism is going to survive. The fact that you are in exile 33 years, 34 years after 700,000, 500,000 of you then were driven out. Hindus driven out of lands that belongs to Hindus. And no government cutting across party line has done anything. I'm seeing you, it is in one sense a pleasure, but in the other sense it's really painful. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know of any large country, Vamsee, where people, the majority are refugees in their own land. I mean, do you find Germans as refugees in Germany, Brits as refugees in Britain? But there are 700,000 Hindus, majority population of India as refugees in this country. Where did we go wrong? How difficult could it be? And we've reached a stage now where when a person repeats what the Accountant General said in 2019 of a model to rehabilitate safely and securely 700,000 Kashmiri Hindus victims of genocide, that people are interpreting today as a call for genocide. It is so bizarre. You feel, as Christopher Hitchens said, for how long will we keep on answering things and keep adjusting to the views of the fanatics? Because they are intent upon misinterpreting you, and they will do so. They are intent upon looking for provocation in whatever you say. It is degrading. It is embarrassing to adjust to them. But what is the alternative when people think like that? We possibly wait for death to rid us of our remembrances. I think that is what it is. We are intent upon telling Kashmiri Hindus, wait till age gets you, and maybe then you would be at peace. There is no other way to reconcile with this, what has happened. 7 lakh refugees in this. Couple of other points about Hindutva especially. We live in a country where we have laws, for example, Section 295A, that prosecutes and arrests people for offending religious sensibilities, and this is always subjective. What is offense, what is not. For example, what Udaynidhi Stalin said, wanting to eradicate Sanatan Dharma, and he is still roaming free. Whereas one 20-year-old, I think, boy from Maharashtra who advocated people not to go to Ajmer Dargah, he was thrown in jail because he offended the religious sensibilities of Muslims. And no newspaper or media covered it. They covered it only after he emerged from jail after 45 days. This is the country. And even though the Supreme Court judgment says that the state police must take immediate action if somebody offends religious sensibilities, file an FIR, file a case. Tamil Nadu, obviously, police did not file a case against Udaynidhi Stalin. So this is a subjective matter. Can we say things or abuse Islam like the way we abuse Hindutva? If we do, we'll be thrown in jail, we know that. So why do Hindus accept when the left and the Islamists and the non-Hindus abuse this word or this philosophy, Hindutva, rampantly? They do it because they actually mean to abuse Hindus or Hinduism, but if they do so, they run the risk of offending religious sensibilities. So they've found this nice kind of detour that they will, whatever abuse they want to shower on Hinduism, they use the word Hindutva. But besides the fact that there is a 1995 Supreme Court judgment where the Chief Justice at that point of time was hailed as the panacea of liberalism, Justice Verma, says Hindutva is the essence of Hinduism. It is what Hinduism is. And that judgment was based on the teachings of a lot of other Hindu philosophers as well, Radhakrishnan, yes, being one, Ramakrishna, Paramhans being another. So I want to ask, as a free speech absolutist, I don't want 295 to be there. But in the time it is there, why are people prosecuted for abusing Islam but not abusing Hindutva? Especially when I have thrown this a challenge. Name me 5 things for people who deride Hindutva. Name me 5 things that are there in Hindutva that aren't already there in Islam. 5. Just 5. Open challenge. And if you can't, will you deride Islam as much as you deride Hindutva? No one has been able to answer this. So it is clear the hate towards Hindutva is essentially a hate towards Hindus and Hinduism. They've just found this stopgap, and our government, our lawyers, our judges are absolutely quiet about it. I think a lot of this Hinduphobia would end if this fork that has been provided to these bigots is realized, first of all, by the Supreme Court. But then when the Supreme Court stays silent when Udaynidhi Stalin abuses Hinduism, why would it speak out when somebody abuses Hindutva? When you are perpetually asked to rise up as a people's movement, to take back what is wrong, to fight for your rights, there's only so much people can do, because we are all working, we are all doing our jobs. This is not our job. The job of the people is to elect an entity that promises to correct injustices. We are not, a billion of us are not judges. A billion of us are not policy makers. When our governments don't correct those, when our governments keep on rearming religions that are out to destroy Hinduism. Just yesterday, I don't know how correct this news is, that the Maharashtra BJP coalition government has provided 20 crores to the Waqf board, 10 crores to the Waqf board. What's going on out here? You have the minority ministry under the BJP in the last 10 years. First of all, why on earth should this minority ministry exist? But it does. And it offers interest-free loans to anyone who wants to set up a shop on Waqf land. Now, would they be Hindus who would set up shops on Waqf land? They are provided interest-free loans. You have RTE, Right to Education, that is working in conjunction with the 93rd Amendment that puts the onus only on Hindu-run schools to offer 25% reservation for the economically weaker sections. The minority-run schools do not have to obey to that diktat. This is not, no one is asking for appeasement. People are asking to remove the discrimination that is happening against Hindus and Hinduism. I'm not even going to Hindu temples. I'm not going to Places of Worship Act. I'm not going to the draconian nature of many legislations or the Waqf Act. I'm just talking about, these are commonsensical, plain, logical and rational discriminations that are happening. And if for the last 10 years you're not able to remove them, do you plan with massive majority? You plan to remove them with a coalition government?
Thank you, Anand. Now that you've entered...
First of all, Jai Shri Ram. My analysis is that Savarkar resides in our lips, Gandhi in our spine, and Marx in our soul. Savarkar resides on our lips, Gandhi in our spine, and Karl Marx in our soul. Because the rule of keep left has not changed. I genuinely believe that the end result of the last 10 years is the utter success of the left. They have successfully proven that even the ones who call themselves on the non-left use Savarkar exclusively for lip service, while having the will of Gandhi in dealing with jihadi terrorism, and while constantly pushing marks in every realm of our social sphere, specifically in education and history. That has not changed.
So Savarkar could you?
Savarkar on the lips, Gandhi in the spine, and Marx in the soul. So, I say this for very clear reasons, and I'm not saying this because this is wordplay at play. The existence of a right is, first of all, the biggest possible myth in this country. It does not exist. It does not exist whatsoever. It exists in breach, not in default. It exists in the proviso, not in the section, to put it in the lawyer's language. And it's a minuscule proviso which exists in enclaves and islands, not in the mainland. I'm going to be thrown two specific initiatives or two specific projects, the Ram Mandir and 370. This is what people are going to tell me. I will repeat this for abundant public consumption. Ram Mandir was well on its way even before 2014, because the verdict of the Allahabad High Court came when no Hindutva party was in power either at the state or in the center. Because the evidence was so irrefutable, and most importantly, the determination of that case, let's say of the proponents of the case from the Hindu side, come on, they fought the entire system when the BJP was not a political force to reckon with. They've been doing this for decades and centuries, for God's sakes. So the construction of the Ram Mandir, yes. But the verdict in itself, somebody else must take credit for it. The people who actually worked for it. And it's not just about the lawyers. All the groups that came together to make it possible. 370 in itself was never the goal. It was only a means to an end. Are we anyway close to reaching that end? Is it even remotely in sight? I'm completely with Anand when he says that how much can you expect the society to constantly wake up when it knows that it does not have leaders? Because even in cultural spheres, you need the Pareto principle at work, where you have cultural leadership being provided, thought leadership being provided. Every societal structure of the Hindu system and the Hindu way of life that was meant to provide cultural leadership was systematically destroyed by the independent Indian state by taking forward the colonial policy. Then the entire society has been rendered subservient to the state and to organizations without having their own means to protect themselves in any way, economically, socially, politically, or for that matter, even physically. So at this point, I'm genuinely hoping that out of sheer compulsion, the society will look inward. When I said this from 2014 to 2024, I was being told on social media constantly that this guy has no better thing to do than to constantly criticize those in power. Because I said, okay, let time prove me right. It's not as if I want to be proven right. If I'm wrong, the society benefits. If I'm right, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate if I'm right. Because it doesn't help me in any way. It endangers my family, it endangers my children, it endangers my extended relatives and my well-wishers, just as it endangers every other Hindu. So there is no vested interest or a dog in the race to be proven right, because then I'm investing in my ego as opposed to my own safety and the cause. And the worst part is that we are constantly waiting to celebrate every ephemeral triumph as opposed to looking for long-term policy outcomes. All other detractors or all detractors of the Hindu society invest in policy, and politics for them is a medium for policy, whereas we simply invest in politics without looking at policy. And the educated lot is more in the Hindu society, and uske baad bhi yahi halat hai. I'm blaming both parties, by the way. However, I will make the very clear statement that as long as this facade of normalcy continues, we will be outnumbered in our sleep, in our slumber. We'll be outflanked in our slumber. 3 back-to-back incidents in a place where supposedly 370 has been revoked, and not even in the valley, in Jammu.
4, I think.
Yes, and I'm so sorry for saying this, but I told you so is coming to my mind for a very good reason. 2017, when I delivered a lecture, thanks to Sangam Talks, on the question of Rohingya illegal migration, one of the first things I pointed out was they're encircling the cantonment of Jammu. How is it that people who come all the way from Burma manage to settle exclusively in Jammu? 2017, we said this. Previously, you had only Bangladeshis to contend with. Now you have to deal with Rohingyas as well. And history says both of them come from the same stock. This is no more academic. I completely agree with Vamsee Garu that rearming Hinduism is necessary, but I'm going in a slightly literal sense. And I'm making the very clear statement that can anybody accuse us or anybody of us in the last 10 years of not having disseminated enough knowledge for people to awaken? What do you think we've been doing? How many lectures have been spent crying horse on the subject? Your survival as a community doesn't matter. Your survival as an individual is the only thing that seems to matter. I'm consciously going to watch the next 5 years for multiple reasons, because I genuinely believe, against the deepest of my, let's say, nature, I'm an optimist to the core, but I'm genuinely going to watch the next 5 years for 2 or 3 things. The demographic inversion is reaching a tipping point in certain sensitive areas. I've never been a fan of cricket, Ashish. Never. Unless it's Pakistan on the other side, that's a different issue altogether. But even then, I find it absolutely absurd for us to invest in that sporting event thinking that they're fighting some kind of a war against Pakistan, because it's not the case. The kind of relationships that they enjoy with each other outside of the game and outside the ground is very different. The rest of us are just idiots to think that there is some kind of a war going on there. I am of the view that, okay, us din cricket chal raha tha, you didn't know, news was still pouring in, so you didn't know. What happened thereafter? How many people reacted to it? How many people expected hard answers from the government? How many people posed uncomfortable questions to the government and saying, what exactly is happening there? We need a census as quickly as possible. Until and unless we have the numbers, we are being led down a dark path with music being played and with garland around us. And that can only lead to Bali ka Bakra from there. The jihadi thrives in peacetime because that time is spent in preparation. Whereas that time is spent by Hindus in celebration. And when suddenly you're caught unawares, you have no response mechanisms whatsoever. I certainly believe that there are some aspects of our problems and challenges that can be addressed legally. But law requires political will to be its starting point. The ball is set rolling by political will. Political will is made possible by political incentive or disincentive. As someone who also leads a regular professional life, I am saying that Hindus are in that unfortunate position where they have no other option but to constantly scream and air their expectations. So in the interest of self-preservation, what are the options and cards on the table that you're actually left with? Almost nothing. Because the reality also is, what are the political options otherwise? Horrendous. If the elections of 2024 proved anything, you really have nobody else to choose from. What a pathetic situation for the largest democracy in the world. So the reality check that the verdict has given to both sides with respect to their respective positions is, according to me, the only silver lining of the outcome of 2024. Most of us remember how 2004 felt. So we should have been relieved that 2024 was not a 2004. But we are actually hoping that this would be a tipping point of sorts, because now is the time that the society also gets to stand up and make itself. So everybody has to go through an internal chintan and manthan in the language that they love to use. I am at this point positively jaded with these discussions. I have no more patience for them because I don't see the point of it. I'm just hoping that the actual works which will stand the test of time and posterity, such as these, will be constantly produced in the hope that the young generation that is consuming it will draw the right lessons as opposed to reading pamphlets and propaganda documents. Because the hope is that we actually hold the mirror and speak truth to whoever is in power and say, sorry, our issues are yet to be addressed. When people said कश्मीरी पंडित कर क्या रहे थे, वहां से उन्होंने पलायन कैसे किया, वो पलायन नहीं कर रहे थे, उनको वहां से भगाया गया. And don't ever point fingers at the Kashmiri Pandit community ever, because the rest of us are a macrocosmic representation of the Kashmiri Pandit community. It's only a matter of time and it's only a matter of happenstance that we are still not IDPs, internally displaced persons. And according to me, वो कार्य भी प्रगति में है, thanks to demographic inversion in multiple places. If Delhi is not safe, tell me which part of the country is safe. So, perhaps my only suggestion to all the youngsters sitting here, with the deepest of humility and with no intention to cause offense, हमारे साथ सेल्फी लेना बंद कीजिए, उससे कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. Just focus on ensuring that you ask the tough questions from the people who are in power. Don't get blown away and don't get carried away by propaganda from either sides. Hindus have to stand aloof regardless of who they elect and still continue to push their deliverables. That is the only bottom line. That's the only way you get the job done. And when I say Hindus, I mean those who are all practicing Hindus regardless of their jati, because I'm constantly accused of something else. So I might as well say this very clearly. As long as the person who is dying is a practicing Hindu, my heart will bleed for that person regardless of the jati. My position on the subject may be nuanced, may be slightly difficult or even calibrated for people to agree with. That's a different issue. But when it comes to a matter of life, livelihood, dignity and protection, I am on the same page as Savarkar. I am on the same page as all the people who stood for Hindu lives, livelihood and dignity. There is no difference whatsoever. For me, the means don't matter anymore. The ends matter. Thank you.
So I think we'll open it up for audience question and answers.
Namaskar to everyone. This is Apratim Tripathi. My question is not directed at anyone specific here, but I would like to set the context by quoting a tweet from Mr. Sai Deepak. In the interest of making their law-abiding lives livable in an increasingly hostile environment, it would help to keep at a distance the newly minted, alleged Hindutvavadi social justice warriors who push leftist anti-dharmic stereotypes under the garb of Hindutva using Savarkar. With that in mind, I have two questions related to Savarkar's Hindutva, because we know there are certain definition problems. So, although it may be a misunderstanding, one of the byproducts of Savarkar's Hindutva has been the promotion of a neo-atheist idea, or what I perceive as an anything goes idea of Hinduism, which is contrary to ritualism and Devupasana. How much does this impact or say harm the essence of being a Hindu and of course Hindutva itself? Second part. Savarkar also advocated for the annihilation of caste, a stance he pursued vigorously in the aftermath of the Khilafat movement. He saw this as essential for protecting Hindus and organizing them into a Sangathan. How do you view this perspective? Also, it would be really insightful if all of you could discuss on this, including Ashish sir. Thank you.
That's why when I closed my opening remarks, I said that I stand with him on the question of protection of everyone. And I prefaced it by saying that when it comes to Hindu institutions and Hindu Jeevan Pranali, my position is obviously calibrated. The attack on Varnashrama Dharma, according to me, is the direct product. And according to me, that is the textbook instance of the success of leftist propaganda across the country. I will stand by the very clear statement that caste hatred, caste supremacism have no place. They never did. They should never have any place whatsoever. Be that as it may, Varnashrama Dharma certainly has purchased when it comes to some of our traditional institutions. Those who do not wish to subscribe to the values of those traditional institutions are under no fatwa-esque obligations to do so. You have been provided alternatives to it. From the Gayatri Parivar to every other organization that believes in disseminating the knowledge of the Vedas freely to everyone regardless of jati, there is no restriction whatsoever. The ones who wish to subscribe to those notions must equally have the freedom to do so because the Constitution permits it under Article 26. So the question that I would want to ask is, since the ones who constantly speak on the subject quote Dr. Ambedkar, did he put in a provision in the Constitution asking for destruction of caste as a structure or jati as a structure or varna as a structure, despite having written a book on the subject? For whatever reason, whether he wanted to do so to preserve reservations for a certain group of people, that's a different issue altogether, but he chose not to do so, right? I am of the very clear view that I'm using the position of Savarkar only for the purposes of protection from the outsider. But how this system will conduct itself within itself, there is significant diversity for everyone. You want to follow the Arya Samaji route, you have the freedom to do so. The problem arises when you're basically saying that traditional Vedic institutions must subscribe to and stand by the values of Arya Samaj or Gayatri Parivar or anybody else. We are saying, to each his own. These are institutions that are run by Shastras, these are institutions that are run by Smritis, these are institutions that are run by Puranas, these are institutions that are run by Sthala Puranas. Allow them to do what they want to do. Which means, assume for a moment, let's take the same Sabarimala example and take it forward. If you choose to construct a newly minted Ayyappa temple in any part of this country, and you choose that the rules of this temple will be very different from the rules of the actual Ayyappa temple, can anybody stop you from doing so? But that institution is the epicenter, and that institution will live by the book that has consecrated it or that governs its practice. Right? Let's assume for a moment you set up a new temple altogether in every street, wherever you want to. And you say, sorry, here Varnashrama Dharma will not reign at all. And we will choose to appoint somebody else as the priest because we believe that he's trained, he's good enough, his character, we want him. Who can stop you? Who will stop you? Legally, you can't be stopped. Shastrically, you can't be stopped. That's for you to decide. But what is it that you're constantly trying to do? Is that you're constantly trying to foist your notions on that group which is today a minority. That institution which is a minority. And the fact of the matter is, these are the only institutions that have managed to withstand the test of time when it comes to preserving the spiritual aura of that place. That is why people still go to these places of all the institutions that have been built across the centuries. These are the institutions everybody gravitates to. That is why when I use the word decolonization, I'm saying you have chosen to look at your own history with such an absolute loathsome vision that you don't even want to understand what it speaks of. You don't even want to understand what is its position when it comes to an Advaita philosophy, what is its position when it comes to Vyavaharik philosophy, when it comes to certain places. We don't want to strike the distinction at all whatsoever. So I am very clear that when you choose to use the very same stereotypes that were minted in the crucible of the missionary and the Marxist, and you use that under the social justice label, under the label of reform, to start attacking these institutions, you're not doing any service to Hindutva. And in fact, if I may say so, I say this bluntly, Savarkar would have disagreed with you because you quote Savarkar when it comes to beef consumption. Savarkar never said that. Savarkar simply said, please learn to protect people as much as you protect cows. That was his position. He did not actively say that I will hurt the sentiments of Hindus by actually putting out pictures of beef consumption. You want to eat it? I'm sorry to say, I don't agree with it, but the choice is yours. I can't do anything beyond that, unfortunately so. But do you want to really hurt people's sentiments by doing this? I'm sorry, then how are you any different from Burhan Wani? You're not. Please understand this. Hinduism is calibrated and diverse. It doesn't follow the one-size-fits-all template of other religions. I am not saying dehumanize people. The problem is from here the jump will be, there Sai Deepak supports untouchability. That will be the jump from there. That will be the jump from there. Everyone who resorts to this mischievous reduction is not a friend of a Hindu. And I say this bluntly today, I'm not going to hold my punches back. You want a textbook example of what happens when you start making the Brahmin the hate figure, and from there the jump to the church is not too far. Take a look at Punjab. Take a look at Punjab. They first decided to vilify the Brahmin in the name of newly minted versions of Khalistanism under the British period. From there, they gradually moved towards anti-Hinduism because the jump from there is not much. After that, how far do you think is the jump from there to the church or Islam? Throw in drugs, it's over. And you're losing a crucial battleground border state. So I'm very clear. Keep attacking the Vedic core of the Hindu philosophy in whatever name, under whatever rubric, under whatever umbrella. You're paving the way for anti-Hinduism at some point or the other. Two more examples. Tamil Nadu, parts of coastal Andhra, Kerala. The jump is not far. Stop vilifying people. You can't say that I am going to unify Hinduism by making one group the punching bag of your positions constantly, in the hope that it will unify people by creating a hate figure within. You don't have the guts to create a hate figure outside, therefore you're constantly creating a hate figure within. If you had the guts to create a hate figure outside, you would identify the true culprit outside. You don't want to do that because today you're willing to co-opt the jihadi but alienate the Brahmin. That is a conscious choice that some people have made within the Hindutva fold. That is the conscious choice they've made, that we will isolate these groups because we need to accommodate everybody else. What vision is this? So what is the message that you're sending to people who subscribe by the rules of the Veda? Answer that question first, because the Vedic Sanatana Dharma happens to be the core of Hindu Dharma for all practical purposes, the epicenter of this entire ocean that has been created. So what are you telling those institutions? Are you asking us to leave this country? If yes, how different are you from the Naxalwadi, or the Marxistwadi, or the Jihadi? This question needs to be answered. This is the most raging internal debate that needs to be addressed, because this virus has infected our ideology. And the discussion is not happening in the places where it has to happen, because people are taking pot shots sitting in their ivory towers, when the price is actually being paid by people on the ground. You are inciting people against each other on the ground. Go to parts of Uttar Pradesh. The biggest threat to Hinduism, especially in Uttar Pradesh, is going to come from Chandrasekhar Azad. You take it from me. You take it from me. It's going to come from that gentleman. And people sitting here will co-opt even him in the name of Hindu unity and alienate everybody else. Wait for this to happen. This is the direction in which we are hurtling at this point. In the process, you don't have what it takes to create knowledge. You have not preserved anything. You will destroy and spew and spit on everything that has been created for millennia. So my answer is very clear. My positions on this subject are not at loggerheads with Hindu dignity and Hindu unity. They are not. And if you constantly want to use untouchability as the touchstone for every position on Varnashrama Dharma, I'm sorry to say, you must be treated as an insider-outsider, or a mole or a Trojan, which is even worse than the outsider.
Just like to add a few points, if I may, if we have the time, I think. Thank you. Just extending from what Sai said, and I'll come to the political part a little bit later. It always befuddles me why Hindus fight amongst each other. For thousands of years. And I'll tell you why I'm at peace with if we lose everything, but that has a scientific perspective. Again, I'll come to that later, because we are completely insignificant specks here today, gone tomorrow, so it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is that person who fights with someone, a Hindu who fights with another Hindu because there is disagreement on caste, disagreement on a few other things that one person feels is wrong, that same person doesn't even think twice to have a Muslim friend who has never condemned the rank oppressiveness, the rank misogyny, patriarchy, othering, supremacist views that he espouses. It befuddles me. There itself, and I think Sai also mentioned a little bit, you are co-opting jihadis, he said, at the expense of your own. This is it. And I've talked to people who are in disagreement with a lot of people who now they have branded as espousing casteism, untouchable. I said, have you even read the religious dogma that you are friendly with people, with Muslims? Have they ever condemned it? They might not follow it, but have they ever condemned it? You demand from people who believe in one system, condemn it, condemn this, condemn this. Do you go around asking your Muslim friends, condemn this openly, publicly, privately, whatever? You don't. You accept them as they are and say, look, I am a Hindu, you're a Muslim, stay like that. Prime Minister Modi gave 75 interviews, in the last 3 months. He didn't give interviews to leftists, obviously, or to, those leftist rags and all those things. He gave it to people who he thought were on, quote unquote, again, our side. Right-wingers, anchors, whatever you may call it, Did any of those anchors, any of those people and it also came out, all of them said, none of those interviews were scripted. And I've talked to people in the government, and Narendra Modi did not say, or there was no prescribed thing that this question is to be asked, this and that. How is it that none of them asked, why are temples still under your control? How is it that none of right-wingers asked, why were you silent on Nupur? What was the signal you were giving? How is it that none of them asked them, why are you silent on Bengal? All those hundreds of Karyakartas who've died, who've been murdered. Why are you silent on Sabrimala when the Congress overturned a Supreme Court judgment to placate Muslims wrongly? The Shah Bano judgment was actually for the Muslim, it was towards reforming Muslim society, if not Islam, because that can't be, it's forbidden. The Congress overturned that judgment. Out here, the Sabrimala judgment was against perceived discrimination. It wasn't discrimination. How is it discrimination when in just one of the Ayyappa temples, because the deity is celibate and requests that women of a certain age group who are menstruating not be allowed, in other Ayyappa temples they are allowed. But the fact of the matter is that there are Hindu temples, I think 10 of them, where men are not allowed. So how is it discrimination if in some temples, one temple, women are not allowed? Is that discrimination? Why didn't Narendra Modi have the courage to at least talk about this? I am fed up of being a votary of bottom-up approach. Absolutely fed up. If the person on the top is silent, I'm sorry, that's a calamity. And everything stems from there. When people saw that Nupur was not supported even by her own, the biggest signal was sent to these jihadis and Islamists. We can do anything and get away with it. So let us look inwards. And that inwards cannot happen if all of us are fighting over reasons where all of us are hypocritical. We are accepting, as you say, co-opting people who have such shocking views that the only thing more bizarre than that is homosexuals accepting Sharia law.
Two questions. I agree with what we discussed on caste, but one sad truth is that caste discrimination is still there. As much we may dislike it and we may justify it that the Varna system is not exactly discriminatory or feeling of anyone superior and inferior. How do we see all this, reconcile all this with the sad truth that caste discrimination and even caste-based violence is still there? Second is we have freedom of expression in our constitution, which should be there in every civilized society.
We don't.
Yeah, I agree. But how do we reconcile that to the fact that in the name of freedom of expression, we say Lord Ram was a misogynist. In the name of freedom of expression, we say Swami Vivekanand was a Hindu supremacist. Right. In the name of freedom of expression, we say Kashmiri Hinduओं के साथ ऐसा कुछ हुआ ही नहीं था. And this is a hyper toxic nationalist movie which was made. How do we reconcile these things?
So when you speak of caste discrimination, typically the conventional narrative is a one-way street. I'm saying open up the conversation. There is all sorts of discrimination going on at multiple levels by a lot of people. Talk about that. Because according to us, when the Supreme Court says even if there is one instance of discrimination, it must be treated as discrimination because individual rights is the star in the Constitution of rights in the Constitution, is the Supreme Court's position in Sabarimala judgment. Okay. How many instances of reverse discrimination has the Supreme Court of the Indian state taken cognizance of? Everyone who speaks of caste discrimination, and even someone like me, I'll be very blunt about this. Have you ever seen me make an argument against Article 17 which abolishes untouchability? Never. Never. I have not even sought to bring any justifications to say, no, this article needs to go. Have you seen me make an argument against Article 25(2)(b) which says that the entry of formally displaced classes into Hindu temples must be abolished? Did I say that? I've never made that statement. In fact, have you ever seen me make a single statement or argument against the existence of the SC/ST Atrocities Act? The only time I actually took a position, and it's on public record, UCC lecture, Bangalore, when they tried to boycott me, as part of that lecture, a boy from perhaps the Dalit community asked me a question. What is your position going to be on this? Will the BJP government in the garb of bringing the UCC affect our rights? At that point I said, of all the governments, the BJP government does not have the guts to do it. Nothing of that sort will happen. Your rights will be fully protected because when the Supreme Court specifically inserted safeguards within the SC/ST Atrocities Act to prevent its abuse, this government legislated it out.
Yes.
Okay? Therefore, I said, I have not even presented a position remotely challenging the existence of that legislation. Despite the Supreme Court taking cognizance of multiple instances of abuse. Caste discrimination is a reality. I am not pixelating it. I am not pixelating the fact that it actually happens across the board. I have never even denied it. When I wrote the piece that even if the formulation of caste is a Western construct, so what? I actually have that email specifically saying, I told the Indian Express that you mistitled the whole damn thing because that my title was not caste as a Western construct. I said caste as a Western construct, so what? Does it change anything on the ground? That was the question that I was asking. So therefore I said, the problem starts with official fixation of the structure completely and branding it for life. That means once you enter a certain category, you're stuck with that for the rest of your life. When in fact, the movement and mobility of jatis has been different prior to its official fixation by the British man. That's where I was coming from. Now, let's assume for a moment you say, but still caste discrimination or Varna Jati discrimination existed before. Allow me to say this. Discrimination of all forms has always existed. The fact that you choose to focus your discriminatory lens exclusively on caste gives the distinct impression that all of the social structures are free of discrimination. So gender discrimination exists. Yes or no? It happens now both ways thanks to 498A. Right? Now in such a situation, shall we destroy the concept of genders altogether? But the left is already doing it, is what I've said. That's what they're saying. Right? Religions also discriminate against each or between each other. For the most part. What do you want to do? Every identity will create the concept of them and us. Then you should have a fundamental problem with the concept of identity itself. Let's start by saying Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, therefore there's no concept of family also. Because then my family, your family. What are you expected to do? I would have expected the Indian state to hit the reset button on the manner in which Indian social structure has been represented by the colonial establishment in 1947 and change the whole damn thing by saying, present facts, don't pixelate anything, but don't magnify or exaggerate something. That is the position you should have taken. And that goes with the caveat, certainly have the Atrocities Act, certainly have the provision with respect to abolition of untouchability, certainly have the provision with respect to entry of formally displaced classes into temples, have all of that. I will even go to the extent of saying, so for whatever period, reservation as a formula, if it is meant to actually address certain grievances, retain that, but don't expand it beyond that. But what has happened over the years after the Mandal Commission? It has only seen the Mandalization of the Hindu community, not consolidation of the Hindu community. It hasn't. You can't speak of annihilation of caste on the one hand and constantly speak of expansion of the pie of reservation on the other hand. And you can't say that reservation will be given exclusively on birth basis, but you have a problem with Varnashrama Dharma on the birth basis. These arguments don't fly. That means you will pick and choose a certain argument to hit out at a certain system, but you will retain everything else that you get by way of a benefit thanks to the very same system. That can't happen. That can't happen. That means you're therefore saying the existing status quo works fantastically for me because a certain piece of literature helps me constantly guilt trip you, and the benefits that come out of the guilt tripping will continue in the constitutional form. How fair is this? The very same set of people don't get to talk about caste annihilation because their entire electoral arithmetic starts and ends with jati. The day you stop it, you get to pontificate to others. But as long as you're pontificating to us on jati, and you're also having jati-based calculus for electoral tickets and ticket distribution and how do people vote, you don't get to speak of samajik nyaya and social justice at all. You're the last person who should pontificate the rest of us on the subject. I'm never going to say don't speak of discrimination. I've never said that. I will never say that. Go for ameliorative measures, but somewhere strike a balance. Somewhere strike a balance. Today you've skewed it so much that the Hindu community is now fighting like rats within itself, amongst itself, as opposed to focusing on external challenges. And that battle has proven itself to be the most important and dangerous battle in the elections of 2024, which according to me is a reflection of the future path of the Congress party. I said this before. That they have realized that this is the weak link. And then we had geniuses basically saying, that's why we are saying jati ko destroy karo. You tried pitting jati against Hindutva, jati won. You should find a way to blend both. Why? Let's take the answer of what the other gentleman said. I'll explain this. Jati is a phenomenon of the subcontinent, of the Indian subcontinent, because we have all been Hindus at one point, right? And therefore the jati identity continues. What happened during the colonial period is the exaltation of the jati identity at the expense of the Hindu identity. Exaltation of the local identity at the expense of the Sanskritic identity, therefore leading to jati-based movements and therefore leading to regional movements and chauvinistic movements like the Dravidian movement. The same fault line has expressed itself in two different ways. Therefore, the point is, if the other communities also have jati, there is a very famous preacher from Pakistan who speaks on a regular basis, and apparently Amir Khan is a great fan of this man, and they met in Makkah also. This gentleman never... No, not engineer. This guy never stops saying that I'm a descendant of Prithviraj Chauhan. He never stops saying that we are Rajputs. That Nasal identity continues to exist even there. You're telling me that there are no caste-based churches in Goa or in Andhra Pradesh or in Telangana? Of course they are there. But why is it that they are not suffering from divisions? Because they are not focusing on internal divisions when they're looking at everybody else outside. We have chosen to consciously air internal divisions in public. Fine, go ahead, deal with it. But what you're doing is, you're creating enemies within and alienating insiders while constantly welcoming the outsider. And you don't have a clear sense of who the outgroup is. They do. They know who does not belong to the Muslim identity. They know who does not belong to the Christian identity. Whereas we are the ones saying, जो भी यहाँ पे पैदा हुआ, हिंदू है. DNA के basis पे. Huh? Fundamental philosophy of psychology. A community is created both by the definition of the in-group and the definition of the out-group, who belongs and who does not belong. You have muddled it fully. Don't hold the community responsible when you continue pushing the very same policy, even after 75 years. You have created a political and an economic incentive to continue exalting the local at the expense of the national and the civilizational. That is the story of post-independence Bharat.
About this question of discrimination, whether there is caste discrimination, I do believe that it is more a narrative than fact-driven. And I would suggest anyone who's interested in this question to explore its nuances, to read this paper by Sophia Pathan and Duncan Jalki. It is called, "Is There a Case for Caste Discrimination in India?" and what the numbers tell us. And I'm quite certain that anyone who reads the paper will be surprised by the findings. Thank you.
I have two questions. One, when CAA was passed, we had people sitting and protesting in Shaheen Bagh for 3 months. Fortunately, Corona came and that could be stopped, right? To some extent.
See, this is again, it was the mistake, the cowardly act of our government.
Yeah.
And we have now somehow internalized that as, thank God Corona aa gaya to wo hat gaye. They should have been removed on day one.
Now that we know that our government will not remove us, why don't we start protesting for the freeing of temples in Kalka Mandir? Why can't we do that? That's the first question. And what prevents us as a society from taking decisions like that? That's point number one. Point number two, I think Ashish ji talked about funding. We have a lot of organizations on the Hindu fold who have a lot of funding with them. What is the way to best channelize this funding to rearm Hinduism in different ways? And this is a question to the entire panel and also Vamsee ji from a perspective of how to channelize all this to actually get our media on our side, get our message out in the right way. So this for two.
Can I very quickly answer that? Because I think it's a wonderful question. That why don't we, because we know that the government is cowardly, it's not going to remove us, why don't we protest against things that we want to be corrected? It's a very profound question. In fact, Dr. Ambedkar, after we got independence, one of the most beautiful speeches he gave was the grammar of anarchy. And, he was against, he said, now let's not resort to this satyagraha and Gandhi's. It's another matter that he was, his views against Gandhi were very clear. So everything Gandhi did, he said, is this thing. But the fact of the matter is, one of the saddest comments ever made in the last 10 years was not by any politician, because they are experts at it, was by the Supreme Court during the farm protests that were going on. And I think that typifies the way our, the national conscience is and how we are conditioned to think one way. It is the way of the anarchy. The Supreme Court said that all we see are the people who are protesting against the farm laws. Where are the people who are for the farm laws? We don't see them. This was such a sad statement. I was stunned. Leave alone an adult making it the Supreme Court of India. What did the Supreme Court of India want? That 250 million farmers leave farming in far-flung Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, walk or come by train to, Tilak Marg, and protest there that they are for the farm law? Is that how you want the country to run? All of you are wealth creators. Your job is to create wealth, create education, wealth through education. You have your jobs to do. In a logical, sane world, intelligent people who are creating or doing something for the nation should never come onto the streets. That is why I say we are a banana republic ever since we became a republic. Because we expect people, decent people, law-abiding people, people who are earning, who are creating wealth for the nation, to leave all that, come onto the streets and protest something that should logically be given to them. And the people who block roads, who do these things, are mostly unemployed leftists, mostly who studied from my university, unfortunately. They are the ones who are celebrated. They are the ones who, so street veto is winning. Nothing can be more defeating, self-defeating for a country.
Just one point, and I think there's a fundamental flawed premise in your argument. The state is cowardly selectively.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Ram Rahim, Yeah.
If Hindus were to sit there,
Yeah.
then the reaction of the state would be utter masculinity.
Totally.
And if it's non-Hindus who are sitting there, it is completely, I'm sorry to say, they surrender, they go supine. They say, walk all over us.
Not just that, Sai, when Mulayam Singh ordered firing at Kar Sevak, later on he was proud of it. They won elections, despite him saying that.
Or when Indira Gandhi ordered the firing over sadhus for the cow agitation. The Hindu state, or rather the Indian state, sorry, not the Hindu state, is replete with these examples. So and this is regardless of governments, by the way, regardless of parties. So tell me, the other side knows one thing. If they are shot at, there is a cottage factory waiting to swing into motion, which therefore will create enough noise for the government to go on the back foot. One, you don't have the cottage factory. Second, you know for a fact you'll be caught alone. Three, you know that the government becomes even more, let's say, bold when it is the Hindu on the streets. So again, collective action is constantly disincentivized by the fact that the Indian state finds its sleeping masculinity only when the Hindu is on the streets, nobody else.
They entered the national capital of this country. They removed the Indian flag from Red Fort. They put another flag there. 400 policemen protecting all that were grievously injured. All the cases against the people who did it were taken off.
So my question is specifically regarding discussion that Ashi and Vamsee ji you had in the upward video. So there you touched upon this particular aspect of ecology and how that is very, very critical to rearming Hinduism. So the other day I was going through the plan that the government had of development in the Kamakhya premises, the building a Kamakhya corridor, so to speak. And fortunately, I mean, there were some active eyeballs who said that this cannot be happening in a sacred place like Kamakhya. And then they went to the court, and when the government was asked to file its submission, now it has taken up the task of taking some surveys. Mind you, the entire plan was ready. It was going to get executed. It was just by God's sake that some activists went and then approached the court that now some survey is being conducted. So my question to you is, why is it that the ecological aspect of the preservation of sacred sites of Hinduism is almost neglected in modern discourse? Like, there is no attention paid to it at all. If you term as Shankaracharya of Purimat rightly put it, the moment you say development, the people there bend, the Hindus start bending. So that sort of an attitude, why does it exist?
Actually, yes. I think I got rearmed in the company of this amazing discussion and company. So rather than get into a lot of words, I seem to have it figured out in just 4 or 5 letters. Okay, just 4 M's, but actually this P. So P and 4 M's. The P is the obvious one, propaganda. Since that is the book Ashish ji has told me I should write, and I want to acknowledge the wonderful work being done by Hindu Parenting blog and our 1984 class friends who are here. I just taught an online class on the book 1984. Hindus, everybody should read 1984. I think we should read more and learn more about Western society and what it has put on us to really understand what's going on. I see so many parents saying, oh, we're worried about Hinduphobia, we're worried about this, we need to send our children to more Ramayana and Bhagavatam and all these classes. And what are these classes doing? Many of them are just saying, learn to chant Bhagavad Gita and then you'll become a better employee tomorrow, a better manager. So, learn to chant, sure, but, you need to learn to chant to experience the full consciousness that will make you what you are. So the P is the propaganda problem. That's a big issue. I'll put it separately. I think so many things we talked about today came back to the crisis of propaganda. As Sai said, the biggest crisis is the propaganda within. Okay, propaganda isn't just something that some far-off leftist is doing to you. The most pernicious propaganda today is the propaganda being done in the name of Hinduism by so-called Hindu leaders. So that's the P part. I want to get it out of the way. Now I want to say 4 M's that occurred to me. Movie, mom and dad, Mooga Jeevulu, Mana Devullu. I can't help it. I went into my mother tongue, Matrubhasha. I'll explain each of these very quickly. Movies. I was thinking of a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy. I want everybody who has done the very difficult task of reading Sai's books and mastering constitutional history and the concept of coloniality, okay, which it took a passionate speaker to bring to the people of this country, not JNU, not Hyderabad Central University, not all the people doing post-colonial studies like Professor Spivak's talk in JNU recently, which was such a fiasco. Not the travesty that mainstream academia has become. It is a young scholar who has brought the concept of decolonization into the lips and hearts and minds of thousands of people in this country. Okay? If you've read that book, if you've read Anand's book, if you watch Upwards videos, you know what is going on. So I want to tell you just one more movie because that's how I end up figuring out things. Watch the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy. It was from South Africa. The movie was banned because it was made during apartheid in the 70s or 80s. Delightful movie. Starts with a happy family living in a forest somewhere. Coca-Cola bottle is dropped on their head from a plane. First, they're all fascinated by it. They're making use of it. Okay, then they start fighting over it. Then they all realize their whole peace of mind has been destroyed. So they think it's like a curse from the gods. Flying gods dropped that curse. So they send one brave fellow, you take it to the end of the earth and throw it away. So what is the Coca-Cola that has been dropped on our heads? Yep, development, Coca-coloniality, mass society, many other cores. So think about all of this garbage we are living in our minds, in our lives, in our relationships with each other, in op-ed pages, which ruin a beautiful headline. And by taking out the most interesting part. So, deliberately. So, gods must be crazy. That's the movie I would like us to think about when we are reading and listening to all these wonderful, illuminating talks. Second, mom and dad. Well, first edition of this book came out just after my father passed away, dedicated to him. The new edition has come out a year after my mother passed away. I've written about it in the book. So why I'm saying mom and dad, it goes back to the question you just asked about the family, right? My whole thesis, everything I've been writing in the last few months is this idea of the vertical. By trying to secure this horizontal, lateral community definition of we Hindus, which all the way from Savarkar onwards has been prescribed to us. It is essential, it's important, but it is an almost impossible task. I think we need to recognize more and more that as indigenous traditions, as polytheistic traditions, we live more in the vertical. So that's why family is very important. The unity we need is just 3 generations. If you can have a stable set of assumptions and memories about the world, experiences are getting shattered because ecology is getting shattered, propaganda is coming in. But if you can have some stability that, hey, these are the gods my grandfather went to, these are the beliefs he had, and he believed in them, my grandmother. Once I was giving a talk in a posh media studies college several years ago, and we were talking about the Shivalingam thing, and a student argued with me and said, but that's what Devdutt Patnaik said. So I said, okay, fine, but what did your grandmother say? And then I demonstrated how a grandmother would never have looked at that sacred object as a private part. And at the end of my whole demonstration, they thought that, oh yeah, the grandmother needs to read Devdutt Patnaik, which was not my point. I'm sorry. So the vertical was shattered. So mom and dad is important as a symbol. And even for all the discussion we had on caste, jati, varna and all that, it is a travesty, a tragedy that even after so many things, we are always having to try to explain what this is. The war on so-called caste discrimination is a war on mom and dad. At the most fundamental level, it is propaganda designed to break vertical continuity under the guise of promoting social equality or justice. I think most of us with some religiosity, spirituality can be good human beings and not be nasty to anybody because of jati, etc. That is what all the gurus like Sri Satya Sai Baba and everybody taught, and I think it worked fairly well. But anything beyond that, unfortunately, is a war on parenting, on the integrity of the family. It's like caste exists in all the religions. Nobody else is breaking the hold of Muslim parents on their children or Christian parents on their children. Why is it targeted only against the last surviving indigenous community in the world? So mom and dad. Then Mooga Jeevalu is a Telugu expression, mute lives, animals. So there's a quote-unquote animal god, a lion god on the cover. I visited Sri Kurmam this year, the turtles. So I believe more and more, maybe it's a biologist here. My father was a biologist too. So that sense of elegant detachment that helps you talk about the horrible fate that seems to be staring at us, Anand. It reminded me of my father's way of living, a man who has seen everything. And his work or his love for animals and gods and language, all these beautiful things. So I think the third M is Mugaji, animals. We need to connect more and more, listen to the non-human world, shut off Twitter, Instagram, just observe what's happening with the crows around you, with new scientific studies saying elephants have names. So focus on that. And the last M is, of course, Manadevullu, my gods, our gods. So I would like to conclude on the note of our gods. Take it back there.